So now that I have all my buildings as symbols, I'm ready to start working in perspective. You can delete the artwork off the artboard once you have them in as symbols. You don't need them out here anymore. So we're going to talk about the perspective grid and the perspective tools. So make sure you go under Window, Toolbars. Make sure you're on Advanced, so you have all the tools. And we're going to show the perspective grid. There's a couple ways you can do it. You can go to View, Perspective Grid, Show Grid, or you can just select the perspective tools, which are right here. But first we want to set up our grid. So we're going to go to View, Perspective Grid, Define Grid. So in here, if you ever took an art class, you probably talked about perspective, 3-point perspective, vanishing points, and horizon lines. We're going to make a 2-perspective illustration, but they do have 1-point and 3-point. And these colors here you can set, you'll see in a minute, it's going to color our grid. So if you're drawing green artwork, you might want to change your grid color to a different color, or orange. If you're doing an orange scene, maybe you want to get rid of that. So this is actually all set up the way we want. So we're going to hit OK. And you guys might have seen this perspective grid before. You might have opened it by mistake by clicking on one of the perspective tools. So the perspective grid has 2 tools associated with it. You got this perspective grid tool and the perspective selection tool. This perspective grid tool allows us to modify the grid. So you can grab these handles, you can lower the horizon line, raise it up, make things narrower, things like that. All we're going to do is really just lower this horizon line a little bit. So we don't really want to see the tops of the buildings. It's not a big deal if you do, but it'll save us some work. So you'll see you have 3 planes. You got the left blue plane, the right orange plane, and then you get the green ground plane. And they all relate to this widget right here. You got all these guys. So you got to tell this widget which side of the grid you're going to be working on. So I'm going to click on the blue side. I'm going to draw some artwork to go on this grid right here. So I'm going to, with this side selected, I'm going to grab my rectangle tool, and I'm going to draw a rectangle. And you see, it draws it. I'm going to give it a fill. It draws it, and because we have the perspective grid open, it's drawing in perspective, and it's adhering to all the perspective rules. Now, if you wanted to move this object, you would have to switch to the perspective selection tool. Now we can move it back in space and move it along the perspective grid. You can't just drag it over to the other side and have it switch. You do have to switch on the widget and then draw a new rectangle. So I'm going to switch to the other side, grab my rectangle, I'm going to change the color, draw another rectangle, and you see now we got kind of a building looking thing here. It's like the corner of our street. So anything you draw will be drawn in perspective. Now the ground plane is where you're going to draw things like sidewalks and grass, things like that. So if I draw here, draws it in perspective like it's laying on the ground. Now I have a little problem here. It's on top of my building. So I can fix that. I can either go to Object, Arrange, Send to Back, like that. Or if I go to my Layers panel, I can grab the bottom rectangle and drag it to the bottom of my layer stack, and it will restack the layer. So this is how we're going to create our little city scene, but we're going to use our symbols. So if you want to see this ring outside the widget, if you click on that, it should deselect. Oh, I got to be on my perspective tool. It'll deselect, and then you can draw regularly. You can draw regular rectangles if you want to draw some elements in your city scene. Not in perspective, you just click on the outside ring. But we're going to be working in perspective to start. So I'm going to grab my A1 building, drag it out, Then click and drag it, and it puts it in perspective. Oop, I want to resize it a little bit. Now I'm going to go to my right side and grab 1B. Drag it to snap to the corner. And then I got, just like that, I got my first building. Now, I'm going to show you one more thing you need to know. I'm going to draw, say you want to, I'm going to do a tall building behind this one. So I'm grabbing my left side of this perspective grid and drag out this guy and drag it here. Now I'm going to make this one bigger, much bigger. Now, I don't want it on the street. I want to push it behind this building like it's in the middle of the city block. So to do that, you have to hold down your 5 key and you can push it back into space behind this building. Make it bigger so you can see it. Now, I'm going to click on the right side, drag out this part of the building, do the same thing. I keep missing the corner. Make it much bigger. Hold down the 5 key, push it back into space. Then I'm going to resize it to the right size. Now this building is behind that building visually. And then when you get all your buildings in there, you might want to do a background layer. And this is where we're going to put our whoop, I don't want to draw in perspective for this, so click on the ring. I'm going to do a rectangle for the sky and go to swatches, go to my library, go to gradients, sky, choose a sky, and I don't like that one, so I'm going to grab that. Go to my gradients panel, and we're going to rotate this 90 degrees and invert it actually. There we go. So there's my sky. You can add some other symbols like clouds. You go to nature. You can add some clouds in your sky and finish off your scene so that it looks something like this. You can you can put some city streets in here if you wanted to. Show grid. Grab my rectangle. Put a street in here if you want. So make it black. So that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be creating this cityscape using Adobe Illustrator tools. And that's it. So let me know if you have any questions. And if you look at our shop website, I have an example on there that's really detailed. So I really colorized everything, put some symbols for trees along the way here, put some crosswalks just with the rectangle tool and perspective, and it'll come together pretty nicely. So that's the goal. There's also notes on here telling you what everything does. And there's videos, this video right here, that'll help you if you forget the steps. And that's it.